On how to replace the O-rings in the cylinder head on a P38 Range Rover compressor. The first thing we do is remove the 4 cylinder head bolts. Then you remove the cylinder head top cover, and then you remove the cylinder head itself. Sometimes the piston liner comes out with the cylinder head. You can tap the piston liner so it's actually removed from the cylinder head. The next step is to identify the larger O-ring underneath, and using a scriber you can pry out the old O-ring. Next step is to remove the 2 shims which will expose the small O-ring underneath the bottom shim. So you lift out the top shim, and then obviously the bottom shim normally lies in this fashion. So you get a scriber and you remove the bottom shim. When you remove the bottom shim, sometimes you've got the residue of the old O-ring, and if this is the case, if you get some get some thinners and some very fine emery and place the shim flat on the emery and then work it backwards and forwards, you'll remove the old residue of the old O-ring. Be very careful not to bend this shim. This shim has to be very flat. So when you are removing the residue of the old O-ring, always keep it flat on the emery paper. As you can see, the old O-ring has been removed. When you come to reassemble these 2 shims, the top shim has a slight deflection, so when the 2 shims go together, there should be a visible gap between the 2 which allows the bottom shim to deflect. When the compressed air hits the bottom shim, it deflects it out of the way, so you must pay attention that when reassembling the 2 shims, that they are assembled in this manner. The next step is to identify the small O-ring which is under the bottom shim. You can get your scriber and you can pry out the old O-ring. Then, after you've thoroughly cleaned out the housing from old piston seal residue, and you've also cleaned the groove where the O-ring seats, you then get your new O-ring from the kit. And it's a good idea, what I like to do is get some silicone sealant and place a small dab of silicone sealant on the underneath side of the O-ring, like so. That you then place the O-ring into the groove, and making sure the O-ring is seated correctly in the bottom of the groove. It's a good idea then to remove any residue of the silicone sealant. Make sure there's no residue of silicone sealant on top of the O-ring. It should be free from sealant. The next step is to reassemble the 2 shims. So you get the small screw. I place it into the shims before putting it back into the cylinder head housing. Get a little bit of Loctite on the threads, and then place the 2 shims back into the housing. Before fully tightening the screw, make sure the 2 shims are exactly parallel with the inside face of the cylinder head housing. Because when you tighten the screw up, sometimes the shim can deflect to one side. Make sure the 2 shims are exactly parallel before tightening the screw fully. As you can see, the shims have been assembled. The O-ring is placed under the bottom shim, and the next step is to get your new O-ring, your larger O-ring from the kit, and place it into the groove. When refitting the cylinder head, and you turn this obviously upside down, make sure the new O-ring doesn't fall out. Sometimes you can put a dab of silicone lubricant to keep the O-ring in place. Then you place the cylinder head back on top of the compressor housing and reassemble the top cover with the 4 cylinder head bolts.